A streak of red in the sea of sunlight, small but wrong. As I drew closer, my heart clenched tight, as if a hand had gripped it. An old fire hydrant stood abandoned by the roadside, and beside it was a sight that stopped my breath. A Doberman puppy. Tiny, gaunt, legs trembling, its neck shackled by a rusted chain. 3, maybe 4 months old, an age when it should have been tumoring across a lawn or sleeping in someone's arms. But its body no longer looked like a puppy's. Its belly bulged grotesquely, swollen and hard, as if ready to burst under the burning sun. The thin skin stretched tight and red, cooking in the heat. Its breathing came fast and shallow, every gasp clawing at a chest too small to contain the pain pressing from inside. Above the hydrant, a greasy cardboard sign swayed in the hot wind. Scrawled across it, "Don't waste money on this dog." I froze, my whole body locked as though drained of blood. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, some sunlit nightmare where everything was twisted and cruel. But the sun roasting my shoulders was real. The searing asphalt under my boots was real. And that small, suffering creature was real, fading with each second in the glare of public contempt. I stepped closer. The smell hit me. Hot tar, rusted iron, and something else, sickly sweet and foul. The smell of illness. My stomach lurched. The pup's legs quivered. It no longer had the strength to bark. It only looked at me with dull brown eyes, exhausted, carrying one silent question. "Will you leave too? Like they did?" I dropped to my knees. My hands shook as I pulled out an old collapsible bowl. I poured water from a plastic bottle, warm from riding all morning in the heat. I set it down in front of him. He growled, a faint rasp like rusted metal about to snap. Not a threat, just instinct, the last shred of defense when the world had already turned its back. I kept my voice low. "It's all right. Drink, little one. Drink." He hesitated. Then instinct took over. His head plunged into the bowl. He drank like a dying man finding a well. Water spilled over his mouth, dripping down his grotesque belly, pooling on the scalding pavement. He drank until he choked, coughed, then kept going. Only when the bowl lay empty did he stop. When he finally lifted his head, panting hard, his eyes met mine. There was no trust there, no hope. Only the simple acknowledgement that I had given him a few more minutes to live. I looked up at the dangling sign. "Don't waste money." The words carved into my chest like a blade. I heard my own voice again, from 3 months earlier, beside Sarah's hospital bed. I had whispered to myself, "I'm useless." I hadn't saved my wife. And now the world had written the same damn verdict for a puppy. 2 lives, 1 word. My fists clenched until my nails dug blood from my palms. I whispered to him, and to the woman I still called for in my sleep. "All right. If madness begins here, then let it begin." The air thickened. Cicadas screamed. The metal groaned faintly in the heat. Before me stood a Doberman pup swollen like a bomb. Beside him swung a sign that reduced life to a cost. I understood in full. If I walked away, he would die. Not tonight. But here, on this road, under this sun, he would die of the pain tearing at his belly, of thirst, of silence. I drew a deep breath. I rose to my feet, looked around. Nebraska stretched wide and empty, no one in sight, no witnesses, no help. Just me and me. In my head, Sarah's voice came clear, sharp as if she were beside me. "Don't just stand there. Do it." I bent down, my hand resting gently on his head. He flinched, then went still. His eyes closed halfway, too tired to resist. "Listen," I whispered, my voice breaking like glass. "We're getting out. Today." Right now, a hot wind swept past, carrying the stink of rust and sickness. I pulled back, taking in the whole scene. The bright red hydrant, the cruel sign, the corroded chain, and the Doberman pup swollen to bursting with pain. This wasn't just a scene anymore. It was a sentence, and I was the only witness. I knew, from that moment, there was no turning away. My name is Michael Hayes, and that day I knew I couldn't save her with my bare hands. The chain around her neck wasn't ordinary rope. It was thick iron, rusted, locked with a padlock the size of my fist. I tried pulling, twisting, but all I got was the dry scrape of metal and the sun glaring off the steel into my eyes. There was no way. I needed tools. I needed to leave. But the thought of walking away right then felt like betrayal. I glanced at that swollen belly under the sun, those trembling legs, those weary brown eyes. She looked at me as if asking, "Will you come back? Or will you leave me too?" My fists tightened. "Wait for me," I whispered, a promise thrown into the burning wind. I sprinted back to the truck, slammed the door, and hit the gas. Tires screamed against the pavement, echoing like a shout. The clock said 1 hour to Prairie Ridge, 60 minutes. To me, it was 60 blades turning inside my chest. The road stretched endlessly. Every highway sign ticked by like the hand of a clock counting down. I saw her image in my rearview mirror, an illusion, but so vivid I could still smell the sickness in my nose. I pictured her collapsed on the asphalt, belly heaving, eyes drifting shut. I asked myself, when I return, will she still be alive? The thought pressed my foot harder on the gas, the speedometer climbing past the limit. Prairie Ridge appeared at last, a speck on the map. A small Midwestern town, quiet, where time moved more slowly than the cicadas' hum. I drove straight into the only hardware store. The door creaked, the air thick with wood, rust, and fertilizer. Inside, just 2 scattered customers and an old man at the counter. He lifted his head, eyes crinkled with age, then bent back down to his ledger. I must have looked like a man about to rob the place, shirt soaked, eyes wild, steps too fast. I headed straight for the tool aisle. My shaking hand landed on the bolt cutters, big as weapons. I grabbed the largest, with red handles, nearly 3 feet long, enough to snap a chain. I also picked up a heavy leather leash and a bag of soft treats. I knew I'd need her trust when I got back. "Big project?" the old man asked, slow and almost joking. "You have no idea," I rasped, eyes locked on the door, half expecting someone to burst in and stop me. I threw cash down, shoved everything into a bag. Every second burned me alive. I bolted for the truck, slammed the gas, gravel spraying behind the wheels. The road back stretched forever, but my heart ran faster than the engine. The same images looped in my head. Those brown eyes, that swollen belly, that cruel cardboard sign. I heard Sarah's voice again, clear inside the cab. "Don't just stand there. Do it." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about saving a dog. It was a fight against the paralysis that had owned me for 3 months. When my truck turned back onto that road, the sun still hammered down like a forge. In the distance, I saw the red hydrant. My heart pounded, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles whitened. I didn't know if she was still breathing. I didn't know if I was too late. But I knew one thing: I would not leave her there. When the 4 runners skidded onto the shoulder, my heart pounded like a war drum. The red hydrant flared in the sea of sunlight, still standing lonely, and beside it that small figure. She was still there. I gasped, trembling with both relief and fear. She was still breathing. I left the engine running, passenger door wide open, cold air spilling out like an invisible lifeline. In my hand was the heavy red-handled bolt cutter, long as my arm. I carried a bag of soft treats and a thick leather leash. My steps were slow, each one feeling like I was about to commit a crime. She saw me return, saw the glint of metal in my hand. A low growl rose from her fragile chest, weak but defiant. Her trembling brown eyes carried both fear and despair. She had learned all her life that humans meant pain. I lowered my voice, steady as I could manage. "Easy now. It's me. The one who gave you water." I came back. I stretched out my shaking hand, a soft treat resting in my palm. The smell of dried meat drifted in the hot air. She hesitated, suspicion flickering in her eyes, then edged forward. With cautious precision, she took the morsel. For the first time, she swallowed not for thirst, but for hunger. "That's it, little one," I whispered. "Trust me, just a little." I dropped to my knees, the asphalt burning through my jeans. The rusted lock clung to the hydrant like a rotten tooth. I wedged the cutters in place and braced every muscle. Metal shrieked, tearing the silence apart. My arms shook, sweat dripping into my eyes. I pushed harder. Snap. The sound was sharp, final, like a gunshot across the plains. The lock burst open. The chain slithered to the ground, clattering against the pavement. Heavy. Absolute. She jolted, panicked, scrambling back with wide eyes. She didn't understand what had just happened. The world she knew, the three-step circle around the hydrant, was gone. "It's done," I panted, breath ragged. "You're free now." I clipped the new leash onto the collar, buried in raw folds of skin. My fingers brushed her neck. Hot, damp, the smell of infection and neglect. I swallowed hard. "Come on," I coaxed, tugging lightly. But she didn't move. She only stared at the fallen chain, as if refusing to believe she could leave. "Please." My voice cracked. I pulled harder. Nothing. What bound her wasn't iron anymore. It was memory. A lifetime of confinement. To step beyond that circle was more terrifying than death. Sweat streamed down my back. I glanced up the long, empty road. No one. Just cicadas and my pounding heart. Then I saw it, a speck at the horizon, growing larger, sharpening into shape. A farm truck, dust-caked bed, engine roaring. It was coming fast. My breath caught. Who was it? The one who left her here? Or just a farmer passing through? I didn't have time to decide. Panic surged. I dropped the cutters, swung behind her, slipped my arms beneath her chest. At once I felt it, the swollen belly, hard as stone, burning in my grip. She whimpered, sharp and pained. "I'm sorry, little one, but we have to go." I strained, lifting her. She weighed far more than her thin frame suggested, a cruel weight from the sickness inside. My back bent, my steps staggered, dragging her toward the waiting forerunner. The truck grew closer, engine thunder mixing with my hammering heart. "Come on, Shadow!" I shouted, the name spilling from me instinctively. She squirmed weakly, then went limp, as if she finally understood. We reached the door. I all but heaved her onto the passenger seat, her body collapsing onto the floor, gasping for breath. I dove behind the wheel just as the farm truck roared past, a cloud of dust swallowing the sun. The driver, an old man in a straw hat, glanced over. His lined eyes took in the scene. Me, drenched in sweat, and the Doberman pup with a swollen belly heaving in my truck. He held the look for a beat, then drove on without a word. When the dust settled, I floored the gas. The forerunner shot forward. My hands shook on the wheel, heart still wild in my chest. Beside me, Shadow curled in on herself, eyes half closed, chest rising and falling shallow. The chain was broken, but I knew this was only the beginning. The forerunner roared down the red dust road, thin trees slicing past the windows like shattered frames. I glanced at the passenger seat. Shadow lay on her side, her swollen belly rising and falling in desperate rhythm. Every breath was a frantic knock on the door of fate. I kept whispering, unsure if it was for her or for me. "Hold on, little one. Don't give up. We're almost there." When the sign for Shawarma Animal Clinic appeared at the edge of Prairie Ridge, my chest collapsed with relief. A small building, white walls yellowed with age, glass doors clouded with dust. But to me, it shone brighter than any church. I swung into the lot, slammed the brakes, and yanked open the passenger door. Shadow couldn't stand. I slipped my arms beneath her. Her belly pressed into me, hot and stone-hard, heavier than it had any right to be. She whimpered, a sound like a needle piercing straight into my heart. I murmured, "I know it hurts. But trust me. Just a little longer." The clinic door burst open. The smell of disinfectant mixed with wet fur hit me. A woman's voice cut through the air. "Put her down, quick!" A blonde woman with her hair tied back, white coat streaked with old blood, crouched over a blanket spread on the tile. Her eyes were sharp, cold, but focused. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Carter." "Set her down." I knelt and lowered Shadow onto the blanket. She curled tight, chest rattling, belly ballooning under sparse fur. Dr. Carter leaned close and pressed a stethoscope to her tiny chest. Seconds dragged before she lifted her gaze. Her eyes were knives. "This isn't food bloat. This is abdominal fluid, liver enlargement, most likely a tumor." My body went cold. It was like wind howling through broken windows. She continued, calm but unyielding. "She needs an ultrasound, blood work, and a fluid tap. She's very young, but this condition is dangerous." I collapsed onto the tile, staring at Shadow. She looked back, eyes blurred with fatigue, following the doctor's every move. She didn't know what liver tumor meant. She only knew her belly hurt, breathing was hard, and the world was fading. Dr. Carter looked at me. "Are you the owner?" I shook my head, throat tight. "I found her. Abandoned, chained to a hydrant, with a sign." My voice cracked. It said, "Don't waste money on this dog." Her eyes darkened. A pause. Then she stood, drawing a deep breath. "Listen, Michael. This will be a long road, no miracles, just day by day. Diuretics, antibiotics if infection, strict low-protein diet, rest. She may need repeated taps. And there's a chance she won't make it." I looked down at Shadow. Her eyes shut again, too weary to fight. Her belly heaved, stretched like a balloon ready to burst. In my head, Sarah's voice echoed, clear and insistent. "Don't just stand there. Do it. It will cost. It will drain you. At times, it will feel hopeless, Doctor," Carter said, eyes locked on mine. "Are you ready?" "I need a real answer." I placed my hand on Shadow's head, stroking her coarse fur. Her eyes opened for one fleeting second. They didn't beg. They didn't plead. They only asked, "Will you leave me again?" My hand tightened. The pain of losing Sarah flared like fire in my chest, but this time I refused to stand still. "Yes," I said, my voice rough but steady. "I'll stay. No matter how this ends, I won't abandon her." Dr. Carter nodded, her eyes softening for a moment. She wrote in the file, "Name, Shadow." Beside me, the Doberman pup breathed shallow but steady, her swollen belly still taut, yet her breaths slower, calmer. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but here, in this antiseptic room, A decision had been made, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel useless anymore. I rented a room at the Prairie Ridge Motel, where water stains crept down the walls and the fluorescent light buzzed like a trapped mosquito. That cheap room became a field hospital for me and Shadow. On the scratched tile floor, I spread my old blanket and lay her down. Shadow still wheezed, her swollen belly rising and falling under the pale light. I sat right beside her, Doctor. Evelyn Carter's prescription and instructions clenched in my hand. She had scrawled across the page in block letters, "Strict, no compromise." I dripped the diuretic into a soft piece of pâté and slid it toward her. Shadow eyed me warily, then swallowed. I watched the swell of her belly rise and fall. A sliver of hope slipped into my chest. Feeding her wasn't just feeding a dog. It was a surgery of the mind. I measured every gram of food, every milliliter of water, stopping after each swallow to study her. If she vomited, all progress was lost. If she ate too much, her liver could rupture like a balloon. Never in my life had I imagined I'd be bound to a measuring spoon and a wad of tissues, wiping drool from a puppy's chin. That first night, I didn't sleep. Shadow whimpered softly, a sound like static leaking from a broken radio. I leaned against the bed, watching her curled on the blanket, her tiny legs trembling as her belly pressed outward. I wanted to hold her, but feared hurting her. All I could do was whisper, "Hang on. We made it out of the hydrant. We can't fall here." Each morning, I carried her to the patch of grass behind the motel. We only managed a few steps. 1, 2, then stop. Her breath rasped. Her belly hardened. I made a sling from an old bedsheet, looping it under her belly to ease the pressure. Watching her fragile body depend on that cloth, I saw myself after Sarah's funeral. A man dragging one step at a time, held up only by the thin fabric of memory. Sometimes the darkness returned. Shadow would fix her brown eyes on me, pleading, "Why won't you feed me more?" My hand shook as I held a strip of jerky, almost lifting it to her mouth. But Dr. Carter's words burned in my head. "If you pity her with food, you'll kill her." I dropped the jerky. Shadow kept watching, her eyes sinking deep with sadness. Then, unexpectedly, she leaned forward and licked my finger. A shaky, feeble lick. But to me, it was a blessing. On the third day, as I cleaned the raw sores on her belly with a warm cloth, Shadow didn't whimper. She rested her chin on my wrist, exhaled softly, as if admitting I wasn't the one who would abandon her. I sat still, tears falling onto the towel, mixing with the sharp scent of antiseptic. One afternoon, she tried to stand on her own. Wobbling, trembling, but her tiny legs actually held her weight for a few seconds. I shouted in that shabby motel room like a madman, "That's it!" Good girl, Shadow. The sound ripped from my throat after months of silence. That cheer wasn't for a step. It was for the realization that neither of us had completely given up. That night, as I read Sarah's old notes, Shadow inched closer. She pushed forward, weak but determined, and laid her head on my lap. I froze, my hand trembling as I set it on her head. She didn't pull away. Her breathing evened, slowed. In the dim motel light, in the haze of medicine, sweat, and despair, I understood. We were learning to survive together. No more hydrant, no more sign of contempt, just a man and a Doberman pup, both scarred, trying to make it through each long night. And for the first time since losing Sarah, I whispered a sentence I never believed I could say. "We're gonna be okay, Shadow. We're gonna be okay." After weeks in Prairie Ridge, I decided it was time to take Shadow further. We had made small steps forward. Her weight had gone down a little, her breathing steadier, and sometimes she even managed to stand for a few seconds. But that suffocating motel room couldn't be the place for a new beginning. I wanted space, a horizon wide enough that the darkness wouldn't close in. We drove into the Colorado Rockies. The road twisted upward, the air thinning, the smell of hot asphalt fading into the scent of pine and damp earth. When the lake came into view, a deep blue mirror holding the sky, I saw Shadow lift her head, her ears twitching softly. I opened the door. She hesitated, then stepped down. Her walk was still heavy, but her eyes carried curiosity now. We followed the shoreline, the ground littered with wild grass and flowers shivering in the wind. I picked up a dry pine cone and tossed it lightly toward the water's edge. It spun, sending ripples across the glassy surface. Shadow froze, eyes locked on the ripples. Then she looked at me. In that glance, I saw a question. Not about pain, not about abandonment, but, is this play? She stepped into the lake. One step, two. Cold water rose to her skinny knees. Her body trembled, but this time not from fear. This time from wonder. She stopped, letting the cool water cradle her swollen belly, easing the weight that had burdened her for so long. Her eyes slid closed, peace spreading across her face. Then, suddenly, her muzzle brushed the floating pine cone. From her throat came a sound, not a whimper, not a cry of panic. A bark, short, sharp, ringing across the lake. I collapsed onto the grass, tears flooding my eyes. I had never thought I'd hear it. That first bark, a sound so ordinary for any dog, yet for Shadow, it was a declaration. I am alive. I am back. She barked again, the echo bouncing against the trees, then turned toward me, her tail giving the faintest wag. I laughed through tears. I kicked off my shoes and stepped into the water with her. The cold soaked my pants, but I didn't care. I reached out, stroked her head. She looked up, eyes bright for the first time. I whispered, "Do you hear that, Sarah?" She barked. She really barked. I sat by the lake until the sun slipped behind the pines. Shadow lay beside me, soaked through, her breathing steady, not the wheeze of before. She closed her eyes, chin resting on my knee, as if the world had finally granted her a place of peace. In that moment, I understood that bark wasn't only her return, it was my resurrection, too. After Sarah's death, I thought my life was nothing but emptiness. But now, beside a little Doberman once deemed worthless, I had found a new pulse. The pain hadn't vanished. Her scars remained, and so did mine. But in the golden evening on that Colorado lake, with her bark ringing like a bell of life, I knew. We were stepping out of the shadows, one fragile step at a time, and we were never going back. Autumn crept in slowly as Shadow and I left the Colorado mountains. We had wandered for months through sun-soaked fields, quiet small towns, and roads where the wind stretched long as memory. But at some point, I knew, it was time to stop. Not out of exhaustion, but because both of us deserved a home. We found it in Oregon, a small wooden house, roof tinged green with moss, a wide backyard enclosed by a fence, and beyond it a trail leading straight into the national forest. It wasn't grand, but when I opened the door and the scent of old pine mixed with warm golden light poured in, I knew. This was a place where both of us could begin again. Shadow stepped onto the grass like a child set free for the first time. Her belly had shrunk noticeably, her coat was sleek, her eyes clear. She ran a few steps, no longer stumbling like she had at the motel. Her tail wagged, simple joy radiating through her, and it brought tears to my eyes. I set my camera on the shelf. My Canon 5D Mark IV, long forgotten in its bag, was back in my hands. But this time I wasn't capturing silent fields or the dark corners of America. The lens pointed toward Shadow, A Doberman once deemed not worth saving, now bounding across the yard, ears perked, eyes shining. I pressed the shutter. The click echoed like a heartbeat. I realized this wasn't about preserving a moment. It was proof of how far we had come. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the tall pines, Shadow and I sat on the porch steps. She rested her head on my leg, breathing steadily, her belly rising gently. I stroked her smooth coat, remembering the day I carried her from that hydrant, bloated belly like a balloon, cloudy eyes dulled with fatigue, that cruel cardboard sign swaying in the wind. "Don't waste money on this dog." I shook my head. Months had passed, but those words still cut like a blade. Yet now I had an answer. Not only for the one who wrote the sign, but for myself in those dark nights after Sarah's death. Every dime, every bead of sweat, every sleepless night. It was all worth it. Because Shadow didn't just survive. She became family. One chilly afternoon, as I wrote this very story, Shadow dropped an old tennis ball into my lap. She looked up, eyes sparkling, and barked once, short, clear, decisive. I laughed aloud. It wasn't just an invitation to play. It was her way of saying, "We've made it through the dark, and now it's time to live." I looked at her and whispered, as a promise to her and to Sarah, I didn't abandon her. And she didn't abandon me. In the Oregon woods, under the golden spill of evening, I learned a truth I had spent half my life, and the loss of everything, trying to find. Compassion has the power to save two lives, the one rescued and the one who rescues. Shadow lifted her head, ears alert, eyes locked on mine. And in that gaze I saw something both simple and eternal. We had freed each other from chains. And from that moment, I knew we were home. If you've stayed with me in Shadow to the end of this story, you'll understand. No life is worthless. A sign can carry 4 heartless words, but our hearts can erase them through action. I found a new reason to live beside a Doberman once branded a burden, and she, in her frailty and hunger for love, pulled me from the abyss of grief. We freed each other. Remember this: one small act, a bowl of water, an open arm, a choice not to turn away, can change a destiny. It can save a voiceless creature, and sometimes it can save a part of you. If this story touched you, leave a comment. I will be the voice. Because every time you speak, share, or act, you stand on the side of the abandoned. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep spreading these stories, stories of compassion, of lives given a second chance. A dog cannot speak in words, but it can look at you with wet eyes, breathe in your arms, and change your heart forever. Be the voice for them. Because sometimes all it takes is one person stopping, and their whole world is different.